Physician Forum of India. Can I just request everyone to mute themselves, please? Kindly mute everybody else so that we can enjoy this meeting, we can learn from this meeting. Kindly mute yourself. All right, so I welcome all the members of Physician Forum of India for this regular Wednesday Academy. As you know, we've been conducting these webinars for the last 17 years, and I think we are an organization which is totally devoted to academics, and therefore I want to congratulate all the members who tune in every Wednesday, and it's been my pleasure on behalf of Dr. S.K. Mathur sir, the patron, and Dr. P.K. Gupta sir, the president of the forum, to organize these meetings. So today's meeting is courtesy Abbott, and this is a meeting which we have had before twice on the forum on the very important topic called GERD. And today's meeting will be chaired by Dr. S.K. Poddar. So it will be important to have a surgeon's perspective in GERD. Dr. Poddar, as everyone is aware, needs no introduction to the forum. He is a renowned surgeon, very active in daily medical politics. He has been on various posts in DMA, and at present is at IMA headquarters in the capacity of Assistant Secretary. He is a very, very active member of these organizations, have worked very hard to bring up these two organizations to their present level. And we are under his guidance. He happens to be the final secretary of the Physicians Forum of India. Dr. Poddar is a consultant in Apollo Spectra and has been going to practically every hospital in South Delhi. Dr. Poddar is a very dear friend, and I request Dr. S.K. Poddar to introduce our speaker for today evening and to take the webinar forward. Again, expressing my heartfelt thanks to all the members of Physicians Forum of India and to Abbott, especially Mr. Punna, who has been foot soldiering many webinars with us on our platform. Over to you, Dr. Poddar, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chauhan. Thank you. Thank you, friends. So, today's topic is introduced. It is gastroesophageal reflux disease, medical management, with special reference to role of alginate. And the speaker, my task is to introduce the speaker, Dr. Kapil Sharma. He is a senior gastroenterologist in the Department of Gastroenterology at Batra Hospital. He had a decade of experience in the field of gastroenterology and hepatology after completing DM gastroenterology from King George Medical University, Lucknow. He had teaching experience. He was assistant professor of hepatology in Institute of Liver and Biliary Science, Basantpur. As a committed doctor, he had undergone advanced laparoscopic training. He had done training in endoscopic ultrasound and third space endoscopy. And now he is among the few gastroenterologists across the country who is doing interventional endoscopic ultrasound and per-oral endoscopic myotomy. You all will remember that we surgeons used to do Heller's operation, myotomy for achalasia cardia. This was an open operation at that time, but now he is doing endoscopic. I have seen his 2 videos of endoscopic myotomy for achalasia cardia, and he also sent me few videos of endoscopically stenting the dilated hepatic duct in a case of malignancy. So I request, now I will give this forum to Dr. Kapil Sharma. Dr. Kapil Sharma, please start your lecture.
Thank you, sir. My screen is visible?
Yes, you can start.
First, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Abbott Pharma to give us platform to gather here and discuss something about the gastroesophageal reflux disease. And my sincere thanks to S.K. Poddar sir and Chauhan sir for kind introduction. And without wasting time, I am directly going to my topic, that is the gastroesophageal reflux disease, pathophysiology and management. What is gastroesophageal reflux disease? This is the condition when the reflux of stomach content comes into the esophagus. Then it is troublesome. If patient has 2 episodes of heartburn per week and it's adversely affected his individual health. And you can see here the prevalence of GERD is far exceeding than other health-related disease like diabetes, hypertension, stroke. Even though India it has a prevalence of the 22.2% general population, is much more common in older subjects and men. What is the pathophysiology of the reflux? The reflux can be happen once there is a disruption of the anti-reflux barrier. And how this barrier is formed? This barrier is formed by the tone of lower esophageal sphincter, and you can here see by the corollary diaphragm and sphenoesophageal ligament. And here you can see that the sling fiber which make the angle of hit. This prevents the gastroesophageal reflux disease. When this barrier fails, then reflux happens. Here you can see the right crus of diaphragm and circles the lower esophageal sphincter, and it provides the additional support. And it creates a high pressure zone in the distal esophagus, which is far exceed than the stomach pressure. Hence that the reflux usually doesn't happen. Once the pressure in the ileum fell down below the stomach pressure, then reflux
कपिल आपकी स्लाइड आगे बढ़ गई है स्लाइड से. Yes, you have moved to next slide please.
Now it's there now. Is the matrix of GERD pathophysiology is in front of you?
Yes.
So here you can see the gastroesophageal reflux is not always the acidic reflux. Sometimes it can be weakly acid and bile reflux. Sometimes patient has a normal reflux, but their esophageal mucosa has a hypersensitivity. And sometimes these patients have a hiatus hernia and some kind of esophageal peristalsis, which make them prone to have these symptoms. Here you can see if a patient having the acid reflux, when the frequent heartburn and the erosive esophagitis is much more common. And if patient having the weakly acidic and bile reflux, the heartburn is not a main symptom. Main symptom is the regurgitation, but the prevalence of Barrett's esophagitis is much higher than acid reflux. The patients who are not having the significant reflux, but there is mucosa is sensitive, these patients can have the symptoms of the heartburn and regurgitation and chest pain. So these patients, the spectrum of GERD is very wide. Then we have to consider all the symptoms in our mind, and sometimes some patients come with only cough and the recurrent laryngitis, and these patients come to initially to ENT, and then after the evaluation of ENT workup, the ENT physician sent to us for evaluation of the gastroesophageal reflux disease. What is the type of GERD? GERD is mainly GERD causes esophagitis, then it's erosive GERD. If it is there is esophageal mucosa is normal, then it's not erosive gastroesophageal reflux disease. NERD is much more common than the reflux esophagitis. This is the classification of esophagitis. I will not going into the detail. You can say here A and B is mild, and C and D is moderate. And what is the risk factor for the gastroesophageal reflux disease? This is the hiatus hernia, obesity, patient who consume high fatty diet, so smoking, alcohol consumption, Helicobacter pylori, pregnancy, and some kind of genetic factors. What are the aggravating factors? Like some kind of these caffeine, spicy, acidic food, fatty meals, fermented carbohydrate, carbonated drinks, they increase the reflux. Some medicine, particularly calcium channel blocker, NSAIDs, anticholinergic, potassium supplements, bisphosphonates, estrogen, progesterone, and these prostaglandin, theophylline, they increase the reflux. What are the symptoms of gastroesophageal reflux disease? Particularly the typical symptoms are the heartburn, regurgitation, and the water breath. Sometimes the few patients, even though you can see in the salivary secretion, the texture increases, and some take help from this diagnosis. So water, some patients say कि मुंह में खट्टा पानी आ जाता है, बार-बार आता है. They don't have other symptoms, but they have water breath. but we should consider these symptoms as a positive symptom, and these patients should be evaluated for gastroesophageal reflux disease. What are the atypical symptoms of the gastroesophageal reflux disease? Like a no patient who can present with the chest pain. After cardiac evaluation, these patients being referred to us for evaluation of the non-cardiac chest pain. Dental erosion, sleep apnea, chronic cough, sore throat, globus sensation, so hoarseness of voice. These are the atypical symptoms. What are the alarm symptoms? If patient have a dysphagia, odynophagia, GI, weight loss, anorexia, vomiting, these are the symptoms that these patients should be evaluated for other pathology. And these GERD has been overlapped with the other problems like peptic ulcer, gastritis, dyspepsia, gastroparesis. These are the overlap symptoms. What are the complications of the gastroesophageal reflux disease? These patients can develop esophagitis, and after the years, they can convert into the Barrett esophagitis. And sometimes, if the significant erosion in the esophagus, patient can present with a hematemesis. And if you follow these patients, first they convert into Barrett esophagitis, and then they can have some kind of adenocarcinoma. What are the symptoms that I told you? Heartburn and regurgitation suffice to diagnose the gastroesophageal reflux disease. And how frequent it should be there? It should be at least 2 episodes per week. And this should be confirmed by the endoscopic pH metry. Initially, it was thought that you can just patient who are having deep heartburn and regurgitation, you just give them PPI. If the patient responds, then we will confirm the diagnosis of this GERD. But actually, this is not right, and this is not been recommended. Because the response of the PPI in the GERD usually takes 8 weeks. You give a PPI for 1 or 2 weeks and we expect the response, that is not there. Hence, you have to prescribe the formal treatment of 8 weeks after the confirmation of diagnosis of the gastroesophageal reflux disease. If patients who are not responding to the PPI, you should evaluate other problems like a GI malignancy, functional dyspepsia, ischemic esophagitis, and eclampsia cardia. And the very good test for diagnosis gastroesophageal reflux disease is the ambulatory pH reflux monitoring. Here you can see the 24-hour pH. Here you can see that the pH cassette has been inserted through nose and it is into the esophagus. It usually places 5 centimeters above the G junction. It monitors the pH in the esophagus, and it senses the pH when it falls down to less than 4. Here you can see this is the pH probe with impedance. Here you can see the pH sensor along with the too many rings. There are 7 rings, and these rings sense the impedance. Apart from this catheter, because some patients have problems in the inserting this tube through nose, and it gives some kind of discomfort to the patient. Hence, then the tubeless material there, that is a Bravo capsule. And this capsule, here you can see this radio telemetry capsule here, and it has a suction chamber, and once the suction chamber, and it has a sensor, and it delivers the sensor to a receiver which has been placed which can be worn on the belt, and it decreases the patient discomfort, and it monitors the pH for 48 hours, and because we are monitoring a pH for 48 hours, it increases the sensitivity. Here you can see this device can be fixed into the esophagus 6 centimeters above the G junction. Here you can see this is the suction chamber. After this is the plunger, and after the plunger has been put here, and the suction chamber will fix this Bravo capsule into the esophagus mucosa, and it senses the pH. But there are some problems in this Bravo capsule, and sometimes it can cause a severe chest pain and odynophagia. Then this Bravo capsule require immediate removal, and sometimes it may fall down into the stomach. When there is sudden decrease in the pH, once it fell down from the stomach to the small bowel, then rise in the pH. You can see here. And how to remove? Sometimes it can be removed spontaneously, and sometimes what you have to snare, place a snare here and cut the mucosa here, and you can bring out this capsule. How you will monitor the ambulatory pH reflux? Particularly, all the patients whom gastroesophageal reflux symptoms, see the patient is planned from the laparoscopic fundoplication. These patients should undergo pH metry along with the manometry. pH metry to confirm the diagnosis of the gastroesophageal reflux disease, and manometry to rule out esophageal atelectasis. What actually happens if you do fundoplication in the patient who are having the motility disorder? After the fundoplication, the patient has a significant dysphagia. So hence, before surgery, you should consider this manometry and pH-metry. And if patient is already having proven gastroesophageal reflux disease, even though this patient requires a pH-metry with impedance, particularly those patients who are not responding to PPI and they are having the long segment Barrett and particularly esophagitis, then you have to do this pH-metry on PPI. And manometry should assess the esophageal motility disorder. The patient who are having the refractory cases, then we have to first stop the PPI, then you have to again do the esophageal pH-metry with impedance. Who are having the partial response, then you have to do pH-metry after on the PPI, continuation of the PPI, and then you have to stop the PPI, then you have to do with the pH-metry with the impedance. What are the components of this pH-metry? The pH-metry you have to calculate when the pH is less than 4 in upright and supine position, and the number of the reflux episodes, and the number of the reflux episodes who are greater than 5 minutes, and the longest reflux episode. This D-Mister score is very important. If it is less than 14.5, it excludes gastroesophageal reflux disease. The patient who are having the significant reflux disease, they have value greater than 50. How acid exposure time? If it is less than 4, it is normal. If it is greater than 6, it is abnormal. Here you can see that greater than 80 reflux episodes in 24 hours, they are abnormal. There are two other parameters, they are important. That is, the one is that has been measured on the impedance manometry, baseline impedance, and the post-reflux induced peristaltic wave, and the symptoms index, and symptoms index, sensitivity index, and symptom association probability. What is this? This is the baseline impedance is measured the mucosal integrity, and it is inversely correlated with the dyspepsia. What is the post-reflux swallow-induced peristaltic wave? What actually happens when there is a reflux? The reflux acts as a bolus, and when you calculate, then esophagus has the intrinsic smooth muscle, and then that clears this bolus. And hence there is significant drop in the impedance level, and which comes to normal. So if patient have a good post-reflux swallow-induced peristaltic wave, it means they have a good power to clear their acid and their decreased esophageal sensitivity. If patients don't have a reflux on pH-metry, but they have a symptoms index positive. What is the symptoms index? The symptoms index is symptoms associated with the reflux and the total symptoms. And it's correlated with the gastroesophageal reflux disease. If patients who are not having the reflux on the pH-metry, but their symptoms index is positive, we can say these patients have esophageal hypersensitivity, and we should not offer them surgery and any kind of anti-reflux procedure. Endoscopy can be normal, and endoscopy can be have some kind of erosive esophagitis. Manometry, what are the indications of doing manometry in the gastroesophageal reflux disease? First, we have to localize a lower esophageal sphincter for placement of the pH and impedance probe. And we have to rule out various motor disorders like eclasia, and we have to assess the esophageal smooth muscle peristaltic power. And we have to rule out some kind of other rumination syndrome, supragastric belching, and we have to evaluate the after fundoplication, which patient may develop a dysphagia. Particularly, you can say high resolution manometry, which if the patient LES pressure is less than 6 mm of mercury, hiatus hernia, and dysmotility. And then these patients particularly have a high risk for gastroesophageal reflux disease, and the surgery can be offered among them. And the patient high reflux, high resolution manometry with the impedance, particularly they measure the transient lower esophageal relaxation, and they make a diagnosis of rumination and supragastric belching. This is the Britac probe, which can measure the bile flux. But now coming to the treatment, what are the goals of treatment? First, we have to relieve the symptoms. We have to improve the health quality of life of the patient. We have to heal the esophagitis if any patient has, and we have to prevent recurrence. And we have to give a cost-effective treatment of the complication if any develops. Lifestyle intervention that I will later tell you. So what we have to do? First, we have to give some kind of advice for lifestyle modification. and then you have to reduce the esophageal luminal acid. And how can you reduce? You can neutralize, you can suppress, and you can do some kind of surgery, some kind of endoscopic treatment. Lifestyle, regarding lifestyle modification, what are the do's and don'ts? Do's is we have to ask the patient to take a smaller meal, and we ask patient to elevate the head end of the bed, and patient will have to lie on the left side of the body while sleeping. We ask them to avoid right rectal position, which is the make the patient prone for the reflux, and ask them to quit smoking and alcohol if free consume. And if patients were obese, then we ask them to have a weight loss. Don't. We have to ask the patient to chew food before they consume, and they have to lie down and bend and stoop forward, and they should not be allowed to go to bed immediately after meal, and they should not eat before exercise, and we don't ask them to drink too much water during meal. There are two kinds of therapy. First approach is a step-up therapy, and second approach is step-down therapy. Step-up therapy, first we are starting with half dose of PPI and H2 receptor antagonist, then a standard dose of PPI, then we can escalate the dose of PPI. What is the step-down therapy? If patient who are taking the PPI for long together, more than 10 years, 5 years, then how we have to taper off these PPI? This is called as step-down management. And we have to exclude alarm symptoms, stricture, any Barrett, and then for what we can do for the standard dose of PPI to the half dose of PPI, and we can convert, and we can ask them to take a H2 receptor antagonist. This is the step down therapy. If patient we have to decrease the dose of PPI by half, no symptoms, we can discontinue PPI. If there, or we can give them H2 receptor antagonist. If patient having their recurrent symptoms, then we can resume the PPI on their original dose. Now, if you give PPI to the patients who are having gastroesophageal reflux, what you can expect? You can expect the esophagitis healing in the significant proportion of the patient. Here you can see. But the relief of heartburn, if relief of the heartburn, we can see in half of the patients only. And the regurgitation is around 40% only. So maximum response in the healing of the esophagitis and the heartburn, not in the regurgitation. If patients who are having the chest pain and they have objective evidence of the gastroesophageal reflux disease on the pH matrix, and response of the chest pain is significantly high, seen around 75% of the patients. But the patient who are coming referred to you by your respiratory colleague, ENT, they have a chronic cough. Even though after having the objective evidence of the gastroesophageal reflux disease, response is around 1/3 of patients. This is regarding the safety concerns of a PCI patient who are taking PCI for a decade and for 5 years. There are too many concerns. Some say dementia, it can aggravate dementia, it can cause spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, it can cause bacterial overgrowth, it can decrease the Milman, it can cause a fracture, it can cause acute interstitial nephritis, it can cause Sunday gland polyp, and it can in the disease. But this is the paper came recently. Here is data. You can see here is the 17,000 patients who are taking PPI for more than 3 years. There is no difference in any other specified event, particularly in kidney disease, MI, fracture, pneumonia, dementia, any type of cancer. Some say it causes gastric cancer. That is not all true. And this is the only enteric infection was much common in patients who are having PPI. Then there are two, but what actually happens is due PPI to the GERD patient, there's some response, some don't respond. You can see the prevalence of the partial response and non-responder are around 45% in the observational study. What are the cause of the partial response? Because this is the genetic difference, the drug metabolism. Because some Indians have a high rapid metabolism. The dose of PPI which reaching into the proton pump has been decreased because they rapidly metabolize these proton pump inhibitors. What then American College of Gastroenterology recommend, then we have to add a prokinetic acid, and we have to use some kind of baclofen to reduce the TLHCR. What are the PPI? You can see the domperidone, which is particularly due to receptor antagonist, and the disadvantage it can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it can cause some kind of CNS effect like a galactoria. Sometimes it can cause a QT prolongation, and the agency don't recommend the use of domperidone for long. Metoprolol is much more worse than the domperidone. It is also due to antagonist. It is also, and along with that, it have a activity on the 5-HT receptor, and it is a strong prokinetic and strong anti-emetic effect. It also crosses the blood-brain barrier and cause the extrapyramidal side effects. Beothorphride, and it is the G2 receptor antagonist and 5-HT4 agonist. It has a moderate prokinetic activity, but I will tell you practically, if there is a patient who has levosulfide and this etopride, but actually they relax the fundus, the bloating, and the patient who are having the difficulty accommodating food after meal, this has levosulfide help. Etopride, because etopride does not cross the blood-brain barrier, it decreases the TLESR, it increases the LES tone, and it prevents the reflux. So hence it has the advantage of having less side effect. Here you can, now coming to the mechanism of the alginate. What alginate do? In the presence of gastric acid, alginate precipitate to gel that form RAF. Particularly this alginate is very helpful to form the acid pocket in the upper part of the stomach, because they form the acid pocket and the PPI will not penetrate there, and no other drug will relieve this pocket. What alginate do? The RAF localized above the acid pocket, and it prevents the reflux of these acid into the esophagus. It also eliminates the both pepsin and bile acid from the gastric refluxes, and it decrease the diffusion of pepsin and bile acid, especially decrease the enzymatic activity of sepsis. Hence, the HCl sepsis consider recommend alginate in addition to PPI. It should improve the gastroesophageal reflux disease, particularly in some patients, and they have a complete resolution of the heartburn, particularly the non-erosive reflux disease. Here you can see we can add alginate and improve the quality of life, it decrease the heartburn, it decrease the frequency of regurgitation, it decrease the night reflux. Hence, it is in the safety study, it has been shown that the tolerability of alginate gel is very good, even though there is no safety concern in the pregnant woman. Now coming to the endoscopic treatment. Endoscopic treatment, first we have to, before offering them to any kind of treatment to these patients of gastroesophageal reflux disease, we have to evaluate. We have to evaluate by the pH metry, we have to evaluate by the manometry, and we have to evaluate by the endoscopy. Endoscopy, what we have to look? We have to look for any kind of esophagitis they have. If they are having esophagitis, what grade they have esophagitis they have. First, then we have to classify this hiatus hernia. Here you can see the mucosal cleft wall, and the heel grade 1, if there is a normal approximation. In the heel grade 2, here you can see this less well-defined rib, and it's open with the respiration. Here you can see the peculous hiatus. The cleft wall is continuously open irrespective of the respiration, and in heel grade 4 you can see the widely open. You can see the stomacolumnar junction from the stomach only. So we should not offer any kind of endoscopic treatment to the heel fold. Now this is called new device, that is the Gerdex device for treating the hiatus hernia. This is a particularly endoscopic full thickness flycation which has been done under general anesthesia, and this device is introduced over the guide wire into the stomach, and then we have to retroflex. And first we have to visualize the G junction by putting another slim endoscope to the channel of the Gerdex device, and we have to place two pre-tight transmural plated sutures and to achieve a tight closure of G junction. What you can see here, this is the device, and from this device, here you can introduce another slim endoscope, and you can see here these are the plungers, and these give the full thickness closure. What are the indications? Particularly the PPI dependent gastroesophageal reflux disease, which has been documented by the pH metry, And when we should not be offered this Gerdex when large hiatus hernia, grade C, C and D esophagitis, and Barrett esophagitis, and then the G junction flap called heel grade 4. Then how you have to do it? Here you can see first the arms of the Gerdex device has been opened, and the tissue retractor should be advanced to the mucosa, and then gastric wall should be retracted into the Gerdex device's arm, and then we have to place pre-treated transmural pledged suture has been deployed. Here you can see the suture has been deployed, and then fluid thickless plication is achieved, and this reconstructs G junction. This is the Gerdex device. What is this? This is the new procedure. We call it as ARMA. This procedure usually involves the ablation of the mucosa of the G junction by using a TT knife. This is the same technique which we do in the poem. What we have to do? We have to first make a submucosal blast by injecting indigo carmine here on lesser curvature here and both sides, and then we have a good section of the submucosa, and then we have to ablate this mucosa by using a TT knife on coagulation current by using X-ray coagulation. And here you can see we have been ablated these mucosa on both sides on the lesser curvature, and initially this was there, and after achieving this ARMA procedure you can see that tightly this G junction is tightly snugly fitting across around the scope. This is the ARMA procedure. Here you can see this ablation has been done on both sides on the lesser curvature. The result is in front of you. This is, you can see the tightly closed G junction. Hence you can achieve good response. What is the objective evidence? It has been shown in the study that the health-related quality of life significantly better after this ARMA procedure, and the frequency of the reflux has been significantly decreased after this procedure. And on the pH metry, the D score which I will show, that is a normal less than 14.7, that significantly decreased after this ARMA procedure, and the acid exposure time also significantly decreased after this procedure. What are the limitations and challenges in the management of the GERD? Because sometimes patients who don't have objective evidence of esophagitis, they usually fail to respond to CPI treatment. And some of patients have a nighttime heartburn, or some patients have a significantly advanced erosive esophagitis. So these are the unmet need of reflux disease. Sometimes you don't have a particularly the acidic reflux. You can have weakly acidic reflux, gas reflux, venous reflux, and deep chest pain, and supraesophageal manifestation like cough, laryngitis, and very difficult to treat esophageal hypersensitivity and the functional heartburn. These patients don't have an objective evidence of reflux disease, but the symptoms are there. Then how you have to treat? Because you don't have an objective evidence. But you have to treat the patient's symptoms. A patient who develop a Barrett esophagitis, it's difficult to take up. At the end, I extend my sincere thanks to organizer about Pharma, Poddar sir, Chauhan sir, for giving me opportunity to present my talk here and discuss some important aspects of the gastroesophageal reflux disease. I will be happy to answer any query if anybody will be helped. I think I will cover all aspects except the surgery. The surgery can be discussed by the Poddar sir. But what I will suggest you, before you ask the patient to the surgery, this pH metry, manometry should be done. Because of some patients who after fundoplication, they develop a severe dysphagia. If they have some kind of core issue, some kind of spastic esophageal disorder, then we are in trouble. Then we have to again lose the weight. Then these patients require a redo surgery. And then now this forum is open for discussion, and then Dr. S.K. Poddar sir can make a comment on surgery.
Thank you, Dr. Kapil. I think this was a very exhaustive presentation. You covered all the aspects, including the latest endoscopic management of hiatus hernia. That was, I think, very few people in India are can you tell how many people in India are doing this in the treatment of hiatus hernia?
Sir, ARMA is very easy. ARMA we can do. No problem, ARMA. What we
You know, how many people in India are doing?
This is my colleague, there are few centers in Delhi we are doing around, you can see around 2 to 3 centers, but this has been started recently, you can see around a year, and significant data has been changed for the Asian Institute of Gastroenterology. They have shown this ARMA is safe, and they have published a randomized control trial like that, and the results are also good. Previously, but this Gardex device is actually costly device. This cost is around 2.5 lakh. So that's why we are not offering this Gardex device. And what we are doing ARMA. ARMA is very easy. What we have to do is like a point, we have to make a submucous with them, then we have to ablate this mucosa by TTJ knife. So that is not a big issue. But the main concern is this Gardex device that is coming under course that patient have to go. So what we have to do, all the patients who require a treatment, either endoscopic or surgery, these patients should undergo manometry as well as pH.
Yes. You can stop your screen sharing so that we can see you and everybody else also. You can stop screen sharing. And by the way, what were the presidents are doing? You are taking his degree from the president.
Sir, when I was in ILBS,
Okay.
when I was in ILBS, I'm not getting how to stop it.
Stop sharing.
Okay, Dr. Padar, can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Yes. You can.
Dr. Kapil, as far as the diagnosis is concerned and the treatment is concerned, the technology has come a very advanced way, and it's very impressive to see all these gadgets. My question is simple. People who are in, peripheral areas, in remote areas, they still diagnose it by the symptoms of heartburn, by gas, by acidity, etc., etc. And they obviously put people on combination of EPI and a sustained release domperidone. When is the time, what is the signal that they should be looking for that they should now refer the case to?
So, are you not able to, Dr. I'm just sorry, are you not able to stop this slide sharing, Dr. Kapil, so that we can see each other? Agar nahi hai, तो then, yeah, now it's fine, yes. Now you can answer Dr. John's question, yes. You have to unmute. You are mute, Dr. Kapil. Unmute.
Yes. Now I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, you are audible.
There are two scenarios. The patient who has been prescribed PPI and he is responding very well to the PPI. He can take a PPI from together, no problem. If patient who don't have a significant alarming symptom and then who are responding very well to PPI can be prescribed them for a year and together, no problem. The problems come then they become a non-responder to PPI. Then we have to evaluate other problems and we have to do these investigations. And patients who are taking PPI but they don't want to take PPI for longer. Because what I will tell you, if patient respond to the PPI, then they will respond to the endoscopic as well as surgical treatment. Patient who are not responding to your PPI, then don't expect response after surgery. Surgery is to taper the dose of PPI and then switch off to the PPI. And then we have to evaluate, and because these patients having a significant problem by doing this pH metric, but it is fine. PPI can be prescribed for year together, no problem at all. Because what I have observed in my practice, the significant side effect of the PPI is not there. What you have to monitor magnesium level yearly, and what we have to do. Sometimes if patients were taking the PPI, what frequently I have seen endoscopy that these patients is likely to have fundic gland polyp. I have seen too many patients of fundic gland polyp in the who are taking PPI for long. Another problem, some patients have a renal problem, is although it's very rare and it's idiosyncratic. So we don't know actually who will develop this acute interstitial nephritis. No problem, no CKD. No, some patients have a vitamin B12 deficiency that we have to measure vitamin B12 as well. No other problem with the PPI. PPI is a very safe drug that can be prescribed easily by any physician, any doctor in periphery. No problem at all, sir.
Good, sir. You mentioned about the interstitial nephritis, and you said that most times it is could be idiosyncratic rather than dependent. How often should we monitor the kidney functions when the patient is on PPI?
Just I told you, magnesium level KFT should be done yearly.
No.
Magnesium is the
Sir, usually magnesium is not a part of the KFT. That's the standard lab goes first.
because the patient.
Magnesium has to be done specially. It has to be ordered specially. It is not a part of the KFT.
The acute interstitial supply will be significant earlier. This is not if the patient was taking PPI for a year together, then he will develop. If he will develop an interstitial period, he will develop immediately after 2-3 months. So then LFT, KFT should be monitored after at least 1 month. But particularly patients who are having the low magnesium level after PPI, these patients are likely to have these other problem, kidney-related problem, not into acute interstitial nephritis.
So you mentioned agents like domperidone. You also mentioned agents like etoposide and levosulfide. At times, we find CNS symptoms patients whom we give combinations of PPI and levosulfide. So,
what I recommend you,
what is your experience with
don't prescribe domperidone, levosulfide, and this metoclopramide to the young female.
Okay.
Particularly young age, who are likely to have children because hypergalacturia, amenorrhea, they are very common. The female galacturia. Too many female patients come to us after taking these domperidone. Even though they have an issue in conceiving, hence these should not be prescribed. Male, you can prescribe these.
My question is different, sir. My question is with the CNS, central nervous system symptoms of levosulfide. What is your opinion?
What I have been observed this galacturia and this hyperprolactinemia is much common with the levosulfide than this etoposide.
What about the CNS symptoms, sir? Confusion, disorientation, restlessness, extreme anxiety?
I have not seen such kind of extreme anxiety, but this restlessness, sometimes it can be happen in the levosulfide because levosulfide is also antidepressant right now.
And it crosses blood-brain barrier.
Yes, also. It also crosses blood-brain barrier.
Blood-brain barrier.
Yes, sir.
Right. Sir, your recommendation for using PPI and sustained release is domperidone. Is it ended? It's like sorbitate of cardiology or ecosprin of cardiology. It can be used for life.
No, domperidone cannot be used for too long. No, the PPI alone. What I will recommend you, yes, sir.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I will recommend a PPI. Just don't prescribe a propionate at the beginning. First, you have to give a PPI in the twice a day, double dose PPI should be given to the patient. If they are not responding, then we have to add a propionate, not from the beginning. Because what do PPI? PPI don't have any effect on the esophagus. They don't act on the esophagus.
Okay.
Some of them increase the tone of ileus, but they don't have any action on the only bethanol has an action on the esophagus and no other. What actually they will do, they will increase the gastric empty. Hence, because the less gas acid will remain in the stomach, the less likelihood that it will reflux into the esophagus. And the propionate will not act on your esophagus. Healing on only non-respondent or partial respondent should be prescribed this propionate acid.
Okay. Sir, any role of lifestyle modification? Small and frequent things?
Yes, sir.
From alcohol?
Yes, that is very important. First thing we have to modify, we have to advise lifestyle modification like a small and frequent meal, head and elevation, avoid this oily, spicy food, some kind of, then we have the particularly important, the patient should not be lie down in the right lateral position, that is make him very prone to the reflux, particularly at night. Patient who are having the nocturnal breakthrough, then we have to observe this, we have to ask him whether he is lying on which side, right lateral, left lateral, supine. Left lateral is okay, supine is also okay, but right lateral is, can cause significant reflux.
Right. So that you mentioned about
Can I ask one very vague question?
Which one, sir?
Very simple. Anji sir. Can I?
Ashok, ask your question.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir,
I
please.
am Dr. Kapil. I am a pharmacist.
Yes,
You know, just wanted to have one very simple query. When this PPI were introduced in the world market, it was introduced for peptic ulcer disease. That's what I know.
Yes, sir.
Nowadays, any prescriber who is prescribing a painkiller is also giving PPI with this.
But
Does
I
it
will
not
take
have-
care.
Is it required?
I will tell you that main problem which is comes to the patient who are coming to abdominal pain. They have a dyspeptic problem, dyspepsia. The PPI is the first drug of choice in those having dyspepsia. Dyspepsia, what they will do, decrease the acid output, and these patients have a response to the dyspeptic symptoms. Here you can say dyspepsia. Significant patients who are having gastroesophageal reflux disease, they have concomitant dyspeptic problems as well as patients who are bloating, abdominal pain. PPI, if patient take a PPI, they also have a response in the abdominal pain. I will tell you something.
But even the orthopedic people are also prescribing this.
And there are too many prescribers.
Yes, I think the indications have become so huge and so vague that at times they are not ethical and they are not called for. Therefore, I think it is something which we have to discipline ourselves in not writing CPIs just for the sake of it and for any smallest excuse possible. Okay?
So what I will tell you, that you should be hesitant to prescribe PPI. Patients who are having chronic liver disease, patients who are having chronic kidney disease, patients who are having other problems, patients who are healthy individual who are having some kind of dyspeptic symptoms, you can give them PPI for short duration, no problem. But long duration is also a problem because my doctor who are sitting at periphery, they don't have another instrument for diagnosing. They can simply prescribe PPI and have a look for the response. And the PPI is safe to prescribe for short duration by any doctor, but should not be prescribed for long duration and should not be prescribed for the patient who are having other problems like liver disease and chronic kidney disease and other problems.
The term has like that only. Inside village of Onirka, the people who are just registered medical practitioner only, not even having MBBS degree. They left and right, they are writing pantoprazole one morning, one evening for 5 days, if it is not required.
The point is taken, Ashok, that we have to be ethical in writing PPIs.
Yeah. I am totally agree, sir.
Clear.
Let us move to another question. Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question, Dr. Pradhan, with your permission?
Yes, you continue. No, I was saying to Mr. Ashok.
All right. Now, what I want to say, sir, is that at times the symptoms are not very clear cut. I mean, and there may be symptoms of IBS associated depressive illnesses. Sir, what is the role of antidepressants and probiotics in the treatment of this confused syndrome, I would say? Not clear cut. We don't have a clear cut diagnosis and we are just treating empirically. Any role of antidepressants and probiotics?
Yes. The role of antidepressant is here in particularly patients who are having the functional heartburn, because that on pH metry there is no evidence of reflux, but these patients have a symptom, and the patient who are having the esophageal hypersensitivity. These two subset of the patient with the gastroesophageal reflux disease will respond to the this antidepressant treatment, particularly the tristomar and some kind of SSRI. They will respond very well to this. The other problem you can say that because the gastroesophageal reflux disease also seen with other symptoms, they have overlap with the other symptoms of dyspepsia, hence the dyspeptic problem. And because you can see brain and gut both have a significant serotonin, and the serotonin, selective serotonin receptor inhibitor, they also act on brain as well as on gut. So these patients also have a response to these SSRIs.
Question, Dr. Kapil.
Yes, sir.
And many times our patients ask us, they come with classical symptoms of GERD,
Yes,
put
sir.
them on PPI, and
Yes,
they
sir.
start responding.
Yes, sir.
After 10 days, they come and tell us, डॉक्टर वो आपने जो शराब पीने के लिए मना किया था, अब तो मैं
Okay.
ठीक होना शुरू हो गया हूँ, अब मैं कितना ले सकता हूँ और मैं कब ले सकता हूँ?
So the abstinence should be there for at least 3 to 6 months, because you can see the healing of esophagitis and peptic ulcer, they usually take around 6 to 8 weeks. And we should not be asked them to take anything before 2 and 3 months. 3 months they can be moderate. I think if we should discourage them to take alcohol and smoking, because they have already problem because of this lifestyle problem. And then if they are not agree, then we can ask them to take a moderate. And if they have recurrence of symptoms, then we have to treat them again, and then we have to ask them that because you are having again same problem after resuming to your these bad habits like alcohol and smoking.
Sir, now the very last question, Dr. Kapil. Apart from Batra Hospital, are you having your own clinic also where you are doing endoscopies and where
I am also visiting too many hospitals, but I don't have a clinic right now. But I am supposed to start after 1 month and so. And because this, you can see here, you can see the pandemic of the COVID has been taken place before I should think to open my clinic. There's the
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And thank you very much for a wonderful lecture, sir. And very well answered questions. Over to
Dr.
you,
Kapil, can I
sir.
ask you one thing?
yes, sir.
Yeah, great, Dr. Arya. Great to see you also.
Dr. Kapil, so many patients come with aerophagia and they start belching and lot of noise, they bring it out. Is it alginate is very effective in this kind of patients? Or
Now, what I will tell you, why there is aerophagia. Because aerophagia is how it will diagnose. What I will tell you in my slide that I will tell you, it has been very well diagnosed by the pH impedance. Because once they will flow air is the low conductive, and these patients have very high impedance. It can be very well diagnosed by this manometry, and then we have to identify the problem. The diaphragmatic, because the aerophagia is not because of the significant air in the stomach, it is ability to take suck the atmospheric air, and these patients and these cause to give rise to the symptoms. Diaphragmatic breathing is the main thing which they will respond. We have to ask them to do diaphragmatic breathing, and we have to decrease these transient lower esophageal relaxation, because sometimes these transient lower esophageal relaxation are not related to meal. And if a patient has a significant air in the stomach and the small bowel, and because of the TLSR is come to the esophagus, and then this can give rise to symptoms. Then we have to blunt this TLSR by the Leofan, baclofen. They will very respond to the baclofen and diaphragmatic breathing, apart from PPI. PPI will not work here.
right. Abdominal breathing has a lot of symptoms.
Yes, diaphragmatic breathing have a very good role.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
Dr. Mathur is there?
Yes, Dr. Mathur. Yes. Dr. Mathur, sir, please.
Want a comment from him?
Dr. Sudhar.
Yes.
Hello.
So, Bhalla, you want to ask the question? Yes. Yes, sir, please.
Sir, you are audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Good evening, Dr. Podar and Dr. Kapil. Can I ask a question, Dr. Podar?
Yes, sir, Dr. Mathur, sir, yes.
It was lovely talk by Dr. Kapil Sharma, covering all aspects of GERD, which is a very common disorder and disease around Indian practice. But I would say PPI has been used right, left, and center over the counter.
Yes,
And Dr. is not, it is abused like anything else.
yes, sir.
And you get shown one of the studies that up to 3 years it has got no side effects.
Yes, sir.
Is it right? So
how long one can safely give a CPI if the patient is symptomatically better? So they become used to it and they become psychologically dependent on the PPI. If I not take PPI, I treat lot of thyroid patients. Large number of patients take along with the Atroxin in the morning. PPI, which is definitely not indicated. It does stop the absorption of thyroxine medicine also.
Thank you, bye.
So how do we psychologically motivate them to stop PPI? If you stop PPI, how will it affect adversely? Or if they continue for a long time, what are the side effects of it?
First, we have to evaluate what was the indication for starting a PPI among these patients. If they are taking for the gastroesophageal reflux disease, and then we have to ask them to go for permanent solution like anti-reflux surgery and endoscopic treatment. And after confirming the diagnosis, if they are taking a PPI for some dyspepsia and some other problem, then we have to discourage them PPI. But PPI should not be immediately stopped. It should be taper off, not immediately stopped. These patients have a rebound increase and they will never stop you. I will told you this step down therapy. Is it step down therapy? Yeah. First we have to
Most of the time the medication started, CPI is taken by the patient himself or by some advisors and they continue indefinitely without knowing the.
then we should stop. We should stop.
Step down. We should try to motivate to step down therapy. That's right. And
There was a strong indication for PPI, then we have to stop it by gradual reduction by step down therapy.
very nice. Thank you so much, Dr. Kapil. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. I think Lalit had a question. Lalit was wanting to ask a question. Dr. Kapil,
I wanted to ask one question about eosinophilic esophagitis.
Yes, sir. Very good, sir.
What I have seen is that there are people who have dry cough along with symptoms of heartburn, and you decide that this could be eosinophilic. You see eosinophilia in the blood report, CBC. So I find giving them Benocide Forte helps a lot, apart from the deworming.
Which one?
Your thoughts on this, sir?
Which drug you are giving them?
Sorry, Benocide Forte.
What is sentence, sir?
Eosinophilic
Hello.
Hello.
Esophageal LA, the patient who are having the esophagitis.
No,
they have
I was talking about eosinophilic esophagitis.
they have the same problem, the EE, na, eosinophilic esophagitis. Yes. The patient with the EE, which I have seen till date, they usually present with the dysphagia. My 3 patients still are on endoscopic dilatation. They come to me for dilatation, and even after dilating, by the looking at their esophagus on an endoscopic finding, I thought it can be EE, and then I took a biopsy from there, and it confirmed the EE. And other problems, it can be there. These patients have a significant chest pain apart from the regurgitation heartburn. If that is there, then we should be evaluate these patients for EE. The best drug for EE is the 5 elimination diet. We have to avoid them nuts and soya, and then some kind of the egg, and some beef, and one nuts, egg, and some kind of fish, and milk. These are 5 elimination diets that we have to offer them first, and then some role of steroid is there. Instead of the inhaler which we are taking, instead of taking, we have to ask them to swallow this inhaler. It's because once they come in the contact with the mucosa, and then some mucosal changes will disappear, and then these patients have a relief in their symptoms. And what actually happen, and then we ask them don't to do gargle after this swallow, because we want to act this drug on their esophageal mucosa. This is the difference from then we are giving this MDI for asthma and COPD.
Dr. Pradhan sir, I think Dr. Bhalla had a question. If he is still on board, he can ask his question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I want to know, one of my patients, he has down CPI.
Okay.
And he developed gastric polyp.
And he had a gastric polyp. Too many patients are gastric. But we learn not to worry, these polyps are not malignant polyps, sir.
they are not malignant, but still PPI should be continued if they have got destructive system.
PPI should be tapered off if it is possible, and then they should be prescribed. And then we can switch over to the H2 receptor antagonist like renicin and other things rather than the PPI.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Dr.
And if there are no questions, then I will just summarize and we'll close the meeting. Any other question? No. So I think thank you, Dr. Kapil.
Thank you, sir.
Just the last question, sir, from Dr. Kapil. So what is this pH measurement and also suggest response in Dr. Kapil's setup to the
The cost is around the pH metry is costing around 12,000 and manometry is costing around 9,000.
and has the patient to be admitted to the hospital?
pH manometry, then we have to observe for 24 hours because sometimes these patients have a dislocation, but manometry don't require an admission. You can do on OPD basis.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I think Dr. Kapil, very educative lecture, and question asked were answered also very well. You told us that GERD has a wide variety of symptoms. Reflux can be acidic, it can be non-acidic reflux also. It may cause esophagitis, may not cause esophagitis, and then there are different treatments for the different symptoms. Regarding alginate, you said, if I heard rightly, it can work in non-acidic reflux also because it forms a raft over the gastric content. So it can prevent reflux of anything.
Yes, it can prevent reflux of anything now. And mainly the patient work from the acid pocket. They form a pocket on the upper part of the stomach. Then this pocket remain there, and the content of the pocket is usually reflux into the esophagus. Then PPI will not affect in once the patient form acid pocket. And the alginate will help in these patients.
So that's why I have used alginate, which is available Digirab. It's very useful. It works for 5-6 hours, 4 hours, 5-6 hours, and it prevents reflux almost 90% cases. My next question is, before starting treatment of reflux, will you advise on a clinical diagnosis we can start treatment, or will you advise endoscopy before starting treatment?
Endoscopy should be offered on the patients who are having the alarm symptoms, the patients who are having the age greater than 40. They have a significant low hemoglobin, they have anorexia, a history of GI bleed, history of chest pain, history of any kind of dysphagia, weight loss. The alarm symptoms is not there, you can start GI immediately and look for the response. Although it is not recommended, but the response should not be expect less than 2 weeks. Usually the full response should be achieved only after 6 to 8 weeks, but you can have around 25, 30, 40, 50% response after 2 weeks. But don't patients just give them PPI, they will look for the response on the next day. That is not possible. Then we have to ask the patient to have to continue this treatment and should not be withheld in absence of response as well.
And manometry, of course, should be done only before you advise surgery. Otherwise, manometry, I think, before surgery.
Only patients who are having dysphagia, and then you are having high suspicion of the esophageal motility disorder, then you can do this. And otherwise, before surgery should be recommended because
before surgery, in a case of reflux, only before surgery. Otherwise, for any dysmotility symptom. Yes. And pH metry also before surgery, not routinely. pH metry.
pH metry, particularly who are not responding to PPI.
Okay. And before surgery. So, and
before surgery, when you don't have a significant objective evidence of the gastroesophageal reflux disease, if you patients are already having grade 3, grade C esophagitis, then it's confirmed that this patient has a reflux disease. Then
if there is no addiction endoscopy, then you have to do pH metry before surgery. And when do you advise operations in case of hiatus hernia?
All heel grades 3 and 4 and who are having significant symptoms heartburn, then I will advise for fundoplication, laparoscopic. Apart from endoscopy, treatment will help in heel grade 2 and subset of patients with heel grade 3 who are having hiatus less than 3 centimeter.
Yes, so just for information of all, hiatus hernia is now operated laparoscopically. Earlier it was a major operation by when we used to do open surgery. Now it's done laparoscopically, and it's not it's still a major operation, but not that much. So thank you, Dr. Kapil. I think if there are no other questions, we can close this meeting. Yes, Dr. Chauhan, we.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's time to